first off, congratulations on the 6th season of Outlander.
Thank you.
It has been so lovely watching Brie develop and grow over these seasons. Truly, I'm such a fan of the series. And it's just been lovely to watch. So congratulations.
Good, thank you. Yeah, she's one of those characters that she I think can be very misunderstood. I think especially when we saw a younger Brianna, and I think often especially with women, I think when women are too outspoken or too loud or too angry or whatever, but it just kind of gets really shot down and just put in a really bad light. And actually, I love that Brianna just shows the real person. She shows how we can all have sides of us that aren't always the best. And I think it's good to see that on TV. It's, you know, it's not washed over. It's not made Hollywood. It's actually just real people on screen. And I think what's exciting about season 6 is it's actually the first time we really see Brianna just at the root of who she is. We see the core of her character as opposed to, you know, just the sides of her that have come out when she's been in stress or anything else. And this season, she's just really calm and collected and really who she is at her core. And it's been really fun to play, actually. She's the drama comes to Brianna this season, not the other way around.
I mean, if it didn't, we would be in shock. But I think that, yeah, it's so lovely because when we first met her, she had such a fire inside her. And I love that, you know, she was unapologetically herself, and she was very much vocalized, you know, her opinions. And I loved that about her. And then, you know, she went through a lot of traumatic events in the previous, you know, the last seasons. And it's been really wonderful seeing her sort of kind of reconnect with her younger self a little bit, and that light inside of her that was unfortunately kind of stolen and taken from her. And she's, yeah, really feels like she's finally, like you said, coming into herself again and enjoying herself. And it's really, really empowering to see. Yeah, and I think I'm really curious to see how this season, how the career choices she makes, because she has all these brilliant ideas. And can you talk a little bit about how she's going to balance her needs and her wants and having faith in her community that they're ready for, you know, the inventions coming their way, but also that fear of the unknown, which is also as a threat.
Well, I think it's such a tricky thing to balance for her. I mean, obviously the whole tone throughout the show, one of the through lines is, if you can change history, should you? And actually, can you? I mean, timelines start to get so messy, don't they, when you think about changing the past, and actually then that would have affected the future and all of that. Thus, you wouldn't need to change the past when you're in it, kind of thing. It's a bit of a mind mess. But I feel like there is a morality issue, because obviously with the revolution coming up, American Revolution, Brianna knows how it happens, and she knows that in a really sick way, it is a necessity to happen. But also, how do you just stand by and watch people die and watch people suffer? And I think even just in day-to-day life, you know, she sees that she could make people's lives so much easier in the same way that Claire knows that she could help save lives. But again, you have to, gauge where the parameters are in terms of how much you can get away with without then bringing danger onto your own family. And I think what's fun about Brie this season is that now that she's settled in that time period, which I think is why she is a calmer version of herself this season, I think she's just at peace with everything. You know, she's still struggling internally. Obviously, trauma doesn't go away. And no, she's still sad over the death of Frank, of course. So there's things that are still underneath, but they're just not bubbling anymore. I think she's just come to terms with them. And so this season, I think, is the first time where that antsiness goes away, even with engineering. She can finally now scratch that itch and exercise that muscle of inventing. But obviously, it's kind of an added challenge for her in maybe a fun way to work out how she can do that and still fit into the times. And it was interesting because a couple of things that she invents this season, I was obviously researching them because I wanted to know it in Rihanna's mind in terms of all the intricacies of how it would work and everything. And some of the stuff I was looking at, actually the Romans had. But a lot of inventions, it's like underfloor heating, the Romans had. Now we see it as a luxury. And so it's kind of funny because it's almost like things were invented and then they kind of lulled and then came back again. So actually, it was quite interesting to be like, well, actually, Brianna wouldn't maybe be hanged for this because the Romans actually had it. So it's quite interesting, like kind of finding out what would fit in, because at that time there was a lull in that invention. So maybe people would flag it as witchcraft. But then it was really interesting researching, being like, well, actually, she could get away with it because it has been around before. So things like that was cool this season. Just being able to get the engineering side of Brie back in. And I think that just defines her character so much. And I do think that's one of the reasons this season that she just feels far more, I think just far more like she belongs. Instead of just playing the role of the housewife, she actually gets to be her, which is great.
And I think we see how important that is, that she is so multifaceted and multidimensional, and how important it is that she has that part of herself back, that she can explore. And she's an academic, she's an inventor, she has all these sides of her, and it's really been inspiring to watch, and I'm excited to see where that goes. And it is so interesting. I think that what's so relatable in any time in history is how women have had to be strategic. And I think that we see that with Claire and Brie, and how they're constantly kind of strategizing, like you said, like, how can we, pass this off as not witchcraft, or, and, and I think there's something about that excites them. And I think that's what's really cool. They're less
added layer.
Yeah. And how they bring in all of the sort of women in the community and get them all jazzed about it as well. And it sparks a side of them that I think they didn't know that was there. And it's just, it's so cool.
I love how current it is too, though, because it really does feel like that now. Obviously it's great. We've had all these movements, and especially we're talking about Me Too and women and everything, and women having a bit more of a voice. But I feel like there's still a way whereby, like you were saying, women have to be a bit strategic, and that's one thing I kind of admire about Brie. If she's too far, punches Jamie. It's like, okay, Brie, calm down. But at the same time, I love that she and Claire get rid of this filter. And even like you were saying, when they are inventing things, or Claire's doing, inventing medicine or whatever, I think it's not just the men they have to convince, which is really interesting. It's almost like the women are just as misogynistic as the men in that time era. And you still get that today. And I think even though we talk about it a lot and we try to move forward, I do think there are elements where, like you said, women even now have to be strategic in how they pitch things, because they'll be like, oh, I might come across too emotional if I do that, or the. And so I think that's what's cool about Outlander, because I just think it handles so many topics that actually, even though it's based in that century, they are still very, very apparent today. Maybe it just looks slightly different, but it's still there. And I do love that. It makes it's a historical drama, but it's very, very current in what it touches on. And I think that's really special. So I think this season will be good for that too.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so excited. I want to talk a little bit. I was having actually a conversation. I've had so many conversations about Outlander in my life, because I'm such a huge fan of this series. And I was talking to my girlfriend the other day, and we're talking about obviously it's popular amongst the ladies because, we love the steamy scenes and all that. But I was thinking, really why I think there's so much love and admiration for this series is that it does so much for women in terms of promoting destigmatizing female pleasure. It promotes the importance of mutual respect within a partnership, especially a romantic partnership. And you see that I think that's what's so sexy about it. Between Claire and Jamie, and, Brie and Roger. I would just love to know your thoughts on the ways in which this series has, inspired and helped women to feel less ashamed specifically.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think quite often, and this is a sweeping generalization, but quite often I think people have this idea of being manly or being feminine. And I think then often in relationships, it can promote a dynamic whereby it's almost like the male has to be the alpha and the female has to be whatever. And I think what's nice about the show is that it just shows actually it's really sexy when men show that they want you. And men, Claire's a very strong character, and it's not as if Jamie, sort of rolls over backwards for her, but he really respects her. And there's something so sexy about respect. And I think that gets overlooked a lot. And I don't think it's talked about enough. And I think what's fun about the show is that you see these dynamics change so much. I think Jamie and Claire have always had quite a mutual respect since maybe not in the beginning, but once they actually fell in love, they've really respected each other. And it's really changed Jamie's mindset in terms of what was ingrained in his head from being a kid. And in those time periods, he's really started to change his demeanor and his way that he maybe handles and talks to women. And I think what's then great with Roger and Brie is that they're a totally different relationship, and it shows something wildly different whereby you know, they fight and they make mistakes and they're awkward and they're stupid and they don't communicate. And it's just so real. And I feel like, again, with the show, I think it's special because sometimes in TV and film, we see a very idealistic version of things, and we see the kind of epitome of things instead of actually showing, you know what, people mess up and you can get through it. And I think that's what's fun about Brie and Roger. But I think what's lovely about this season is that we've come through that journey with the characters, and now actually we see, despite everything they've been through, Brie and Roger are actually stronger this season than they've ever been. And I think it's lovely. I think it shows people that, look, no matter whatever you've gone through, as long as you still treat with people with love and respect, like, you can get through it. And even then with their personal trauma, you know, everything Brianna's been through, I think what's special about season 6 is that we've seen her go through a lot. Her father died, her mother then left her, you know, she broke up with Roger, she was sexually abused, she's had so much happen. But then this season, we actually just see that strength through things can show in all different ways. Before, Brianna's strength of dealing actually just made her sad and insular and whatever, whereas this season now, I think we see her just dealing with it. It's not put to bed. I don't think trauma ever goes away, but it doesn't outwardly show anymore. And we can see it's kind of a cathartic ending, I think, is what I'm saying for people. So I'm excited for people to see season 6, because I think it shows a little light at the end of the tunnel, whereby like life can go on and you can be okay.
Oh, absolutely. That was just all so beautifully said. And I think that it's just everything that you just said is such a testament as to why everyone loves the show so much and why it's so relatable on so many levels. And I think that in like the best storytelling, it educates, it creates empathy, it kind of it helps us reflect on our own relationships and our own kind of, you know, what. And I think that that's what's really cool. You have these women that aren't, you know, they're in, it's 1773 and you know, and they're going through very relatable things. And yeah, it's just fantastic. And also, I think a big theme of the season seems like it's going to be time, which I think is a theme of the series in general. But in the first episode of season 6, you get the even metaphor of the hourglass. And we know that, like you mentioned, the Revolutionary War is upon us. And I'd love to see too, I'm excited to see how Brie kind of, now that she does feel sort of settled, if that sense of urgency of time is going to creep up and sort of disturb that settled feeling, or if she's going to kind of embrace it and kind of live in the moment, and sort of the balance that she'll have to strike, knowing what's to come, but at the same time feeling kind of settled and at peace with herself.
Yeah, I think there's almost a guilt feeling in there with Brie. You know, Brianna's been a very lonely person growing up her whole life. And I think now that she and Roger are settled in the past, it's the first time that she's got all of her family around her. She has a home, she has a child, that she's settled. And I think there's a guilt that comes with that, because also she knows what's coming. She knows that the war's brewing. And I think where before maybe a less secure Brianna would have reacted very differently and been very rocky with that. I think this season it is, like you said, I think it's not so much coming to peace with it, but I think having to come to terms with it. And actually she has this beautiful conversation with young Ian where she's talking about the Cherokee and just how people were treated, and it's horrible and it's emotional. But I think the way that she is this season, I think it's more that she's kind of accepted the fate of, like, we have to let this happen. And I think there's an internal struggle of not wanting to, but I actually do think she's more I don't want to say at peace with, but I think she knows that she kind of just has to be on the sidelines now. And I think she's just had to kind of come to terms with that a bit.
Yeah.
But this is what I love about the show too, in terms of, like we were saying before, we kind of turn the male female stereotypes on their head and merge the sexes. And it's like, you know, with non-binary and everything, I think that's really a good thing to show that it's not just male characters and female characters. They've kind of merged in the same way that time's kind of merged. Like we were saying before, a lot of the things we talk about then are still relevant now. And I just think it's really good for that, to show that actually we're all human, and no matter how much time passes, it's there's a weird synergy between everything, which I think is really good. And so it's like you were saying, with us having a mainly female fan base, it's funny because it definitely gets pitched that way, but I know so many theys or men that have watched it and just love it. And so I just think hopefully season 6 will be one where I think it maybe just merges all those things together a little bit more without it being kind of this is this and this is this.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And gender not being as much of the focus, which I think
Yeah.
is something that, you know, Claire has kind of always struggled with and fought against since season 1.
Yeah.
And I think that breaking those stereotypes and breaking those tropes, especially in a historical romantic drama, it's really refreshing to see. And I think with every season that passes, a new audience is kind of brought in and falls in love with the show and the characters. And yeah, it's just lovely. Sophie, you are lovely, and you are the perfect Brie, the best we could ask for. And thank you for just giving her so much complexity and nuance, and just congratulations on it all.